again, this is push-pull. You're actually developing the technologies which are changing our lives. At the same time, you're discovering how things can stop it and counter it. And I think the Starfish Prime thing is hugely important, an actual event that very few people outside of the business, and I consider us in the business, actually understand. So Starfish Prime was, as you mentioned, a high altitude nuclear blast. It was, I'm going to look
It
at
was
here.
about 800 miles from Hawaii and turned out the lights in Hawaii.
Yeah, and so it was. Trying to look
South
at the
Pacific,
megatonnage.
1.4 megatons.
1.4 megatons. So that's way more than Hiroshima. But the whole overall point is, here it is, 1.4 megatons. That we learned that a nuclear weapon can be highly effective without hitting the ground. As a matter of fact, for 21st century technology, not so much with vacuum tubes, but transistors. Transistors are highly susceptible to the effects of EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and TRIE, the transient electronic stuff, which we were taught in Officer Basic. So you guys discovered that, hey, as much as we're making progress, there's a threat that could be used to stop it. So could you talk a little bit about EMP and what we learned from Starfish Prime? Because you said they turned the lights out in Hawaii, which was a good 800 miles away.
That's right. And it woke us up because we had at the time, we were beginning to deploy systems in space, and the ones that we put up for our warning and also to look at what others were doing, including the Soviets. And so losing all our space, our strategic systems was a major problem. And so the threat was from radiation effects as well as electromagnetic pulse. We knew that EMP, it's a shorthand for electromagnetic pulse, would be produced by a nuclear weapon. So the fact that it happened was not a surprise, but the magnitude and the extent of the effect was a surprise. And it turned out that all our strategic systems were vulnerable to it. Our bombers, our ability to command and control those systems for the president to issue orders for SINC-SAC at the time, or whatever we called them at the time, the Strategic Air Command to marshal his forces and all were threatened. And so we went into a major upgrade of capabilities program. Everything became so highly secret that you couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk to my family at home, let alone friends and whatever else as to what I was doing. And that was the case for several years at that time. I think books have been written about it by now, but at the time, and then we tested, we built something called a trestle that we actually put the B-52 on and tested it to figure out what the vulnerabilities were and how to deal with it, as well as our communications aircraft, and even the programs that were used to back up the activities out in Omaha, Nebraska, because we were concerned about everything being vulnerable. And I can tell you it was. Minuteman, which we were deploying at the same time that we learned this, and we were upgrading it as we were, the ones that were out there as we were trying to fix the ones going in. And it was a situation where I couldn't even tell my wife what I was doing. Now,
So, well, Hank, I want to talk a little bit about that, because just because you discovered it back in the 60s doesn't mean it's any better now. And I think that in many ways we forgot the lessons you learned. There's a book that I was just talking to Chris about. I was talking about the author. Bill Forsted wrote a book 1 second after, 1 year after. He's written a number of books, and basically he's done a fictional accounting of what would happen to society. And I think I'm not putting too fine a point on this. Is that we still have major vulnerabilities within our own power grid that you and I continue to work. You're very directly involved in trying to get people to wake up to this, but Hank, this thing you discovered regarding electromagnetic pulse, it's only gotten worse with the massive infusion of digitization within our society. Is that correct?
Yes, and we are stupidly ignoring the problem when it comes to our electric grid,
Yeah,
and that's, I mean, that we dealt with the issue, as I said, in the 60s and 70s in fixing our strategic systems, but we didn't deal with the issue when it came to our, our home life. And
yeah,
without electricity, just imagine what it would be like. Bill Fortune's book should be read by everybody. It was a fictional account, but of a very real location. And he wrote it about what would happen to the people where he lived up
yeah,
in North Carolina if we had such an event. And automobiles didn't work, the well water didn't work. And, water is next to air the most important thing. You can do without air for, a minute or so. You can do without water for, several days. You can do without food for a month.
yeah,
30, people have done that. So, and we don't pay attention to protecting the critical infrastructure that we need for survival,
yeah.
and let
Well,
alone the things we buy at stores and where we depend on commerce delivering it, whether it come
yeah,
by train or bus or truck or whatever. And so the worst of all is the electric grid, as far as I'm concerned. And some people think they're dealing with it when they say we're going to build new power plants and so on to build up the power we need. And that's fine as far as it goes. But the power plant and the high voltage transmission lines don't deliver electricity to your home. And
no,
the electricity comes to your home by way of these humongous transformers that are so big that in some cases you can't get through underpasses on the highways or the trainways to move them. And we're buying, I think there's close to 600 of them recently bought from China now in our grid. And they're potentially vulnerable to cyber attacks. You don't need a nuclear attack if you can to attack many of our important systems with
oh
cyber.
yeah, no. I've written an outline of a sequel to my book, The Last Line. Jim Woolsey and I were looking at doing that
Yeah,
eventually, maybe. But yeah, that's the very thing we focus on is the grid. But let's continue with this conversation because I do want to come back to this after we go through some more history. So
okay.
as we moved on through your career, Hank, there's some other key areas which I think we need to talk about, which again are coming back up. One of the things which President Trump did his first term, and you and I had some input in via the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, was the creation of Space Force. Now, why do we have a Space Force? Well, I would argue we have a Space Force because of some of the things you guys were doing with anti ballistic missiles, with areas of interest relating to satellites, because you just talked about Telstar. We had several manned missions to the moon. We then had the space shuttle. We started developing a wide range, a constellation, if you will, of satellites. So tell us a bit about why it became so important to preserve and protect that infrastructure, as well as trying to create something to protect the homeland, the anti-ballistic missile defense, the treaty you guys came up with, and what happened on all that in the 70s.
Well, um, you sort of covered it, Tony. We depend on these systems,
Yeah,
and both in the military and in the private sector, and they're vulnerable. I mean, that's just the fact.
yeah,
And so the issue is how do you get the powers that be to address them? And it turns out that our bureaucratic order is screwed up. Many years ago, when I was a boy, there was something called the Rural Electrical Association, the REA, and it provided electricity and actually supported the work of installing telephone lines, which were owned by, in my home, by ourselves and our neighbors and party lines in those days. And we evolved out of that before the transistor was invented, roughly in the 1960s as well, into a network of systems. Now, the REA was the power source for rural America, which produces our food, okay? And when they decided to reorganize, and I don't remember what the date was for all of that, they abolished the REA and molded it into a network of other systems, but they didn't pay attention to the portion of the grid that delivers electricity to your home, to your home, to the police, to the water power stations, to sewers, to all the things you depend on. That's called the distribution grid. And the thing that is regulated federally and not dealt with at all by the feds is, that is only dealt with by the feds, is the what's called the bulk power grid, which is the power source and the high voltage transmission lines, 100 kilovolts, whatever, and those go through these humongous transformers down to a small percentage of that, and then they're converted as they come into your home to 110 volts or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that portion of the grid is not at all regulated by the feds, and every state, to the degree it's done, deals with it in some different way, and there's no organization to pull that together. Here in South Carolina, I've been trying to work with this, and there are a bunch of commissioners which meet with something called NARUC, which is a national assembly of these commissioners. And the folks from my state, I think there's one engineer among a bunch of lawyers, and all they really worry about is setting the rates for your electricity at home. They don't worry about whether you get electricity or not. Maybe they do, but not in any sensible way. There's only one place in the nation that I know is dealing with this issue correctly, and that's in San Antonio, Texas. And it comes because of a general officer there who was with the training activities that go on in the Air Force. And he got the local people all together to put together both the distribution grid as well as the bulk power grid. And so they're protecting their local grid. But even the state of Texas, even though that's where it is not dealing effectively with this issue. There's a state senator there named by Bob Hall. He's a graduate of the Citadel here in South Carolina. And Bob now, I think, is in his 6th or 7th try to get legislation through Texas to deal just with their grid, even though, they had a storm a year and a half ago that shut everything down for a week or so. Well, what happened? They know what happens in a week or so, and it's bad news. If it were indefinitely, a month or so, people would die.
Right.
And it's not any joke about that. So even
I see that's the thing. Let me address that a little bit because, I'm an elected official here in North Carolina. I have things I got to go do as soon as we're done with the interview. So one of the things I've noticed that I didn't even know because it happened long before I got here, the city and county, city of Edenton, the county of Chowan, invested in a nuclear power plant. That is to say, they put money up front to say, we're buying in. And by the way, we have cheaper power than others in the region because we made that investment.
Thanks for watching that clip. If you like it, there's more. Be sure and go sign up for more with the exclusive content at ColonelTonyShaffer.com and become a member of the Sentinel Circle. You will thank me later for the great things that you will see there. We're going to have great guests. We're going to have friends of the show, friends of the program, friends of me, and it's all going to be fun. So go over, sign up today. You'll be very happy that you did it, and we'll have fun together. Tony Shaffer, ColonelTonyShaffer.com. See you there.